Hey there! In this video, I'll be reading some headcanon lore I've thought up for the Dream SMP. This lore is for Technoblade's character. None of this is canon, I just came up with this for fun. Also, thank you guys so much for all the support you've given me recently. It's honestly so incredible. I don't know if I can properly describe how happy you've all made me just by enjoying my work. I've got a huge project planned to celebrate and thank you all, so if you'd like to be notified when that's out, please check to see if you're subscribed. As I'm sure you've all probably heard before, it's free and you can always unsubscribe later. Now, feel free to just chill and listen while doing something else, or you can watch me doodle some concept art that goes with the story, whatever floats your boat. Here we go. Once upon a time, yes, very cliche, I know, there was a great adventurer with magic wings. He seemed like any other ordinary human until, in a flash, he summoned dark feathered wings to his back. The people of the land claimed that he was named Philza. As a young man, Philza traveled far and wide, through several different dimensions and many different landscapes. One particular adventure took him into the scorching flames of the underworld. It was a frightening place of the undead, filled to the brim with pools of boiling lava and home to fiery spirits and crying ghosts. But somehow there managed to be a kind of civilization in the Nether, though of a strange, unhuman type. The pigmen and the piglins, the two races of humanoids that dwelled within the Nether. These were dangerous fellows, but they tended to be relatively friendly so long as you did not irritate them. The piglins in particular were a little more easy to offend. Some would shoot a man simply because he was not wearing gold on his person. Well, having done his research, Philza knew this fact about the piglins and wore some gold trinkets into the underworld, as well as brought some gold with him for possible bartering. He was in need of two items highly valued by explorers in the universe of Minecraft: blaze rods and ender pearls. To the educated adventurer, these items were worth more than gold, perhaps even more than diamonds and emeralds, due to how difficult and useful they were. Blaze rods were especially arduous to obtain, considering the only sure place they could be found was in another fortress. So, Philza set out to find this treasure, not knowing that he would also find something even more valuable. The Nether was suffocating with its fumes of molten lava and strange mushrooms. There was hardly a lovely sound to be heard. Most noises belonged to beings one ought to run away from. Philza traveled for possibly days. Time cannot exactly be told in the Nether. With no day or night, he cannot sleep, nor would he want to, lest some unwanted company slaughter him while he was unconscious. He began to run low on food, and he began to think it might be best to return to the Overworld and try again once he's rested. But that's when he stumbled across it. It was no Nether fortress, to his initial dismay. Instead, it was a piglin campsite. Humanoid pig beings dressed in the pelts of lava striders and nether boars, armed with gilded swords and crossbows. They spotted him instantly, but held off from attack once they saw the gold he wore. To the piglins, any who wore gold would be welcomed as a friend. They tended to the weary traveler, gave him food, healed whatever wounds he accumulated from fighting the various beasts the Netherworld had to offer. In return for their hospitality, Philza gave them some of the precious metal he carried and traded the rest. He and the piglins also exchanged stories of battle and adventure. The piglins offered to escort Philza to the nearest underworld fortress, which he gratefully accepted. There was one piglin that had a special bond with Philza. She was Ethra, the beautiful daughter of the tribe's chief. Long story short, they fell in love. And by the time Philza had gathered as many blaze rods from the fortress as he needed and prepared to return to the Overworld, Ethra had some news to tell him. Based off the title of this video, I'm sure you can guess what that news probably was. Despite being hospitable to human travelers, the piglins considered it taboo to have families with people of the Overworld. It was often too much trouble, and so in the rare cases where a piglin human child would be born, they were considered ill fortune. The piglin chief was furious when he discovered the news and banished Philza from the tribe, declaring that if they ever met again, he would have his head. Philza fled from the Nether, and as far as Ethra knew, never returned. Time passed differently in the Nether, as there was neither day nor night. But in about a few months' time, Ethra brought into the world a lovely piglin human boy. The child had her pink hair, his father's human eyes, though they seemed to shift to a bright scarlet when he became agitated, and his ears seemed to be an odd mix of both sides of his heritage. He bore no tusks, and so his smile reminded her of his father. It was bittersweet, but she loved her son dearly and bestowed upon him a name fit for a hero, Technoblade. Being a taboo child, Technoblade didn't have the easiest childhood. It somewhat helped that he was the chief's grandson. He was generally respected and treated kindly by the tribespeople. However, when the adults were not looking, the children would pick on him. They made fun of how he looked, how he was half human. They would kick and punch, pull his hair and shove him around. He would lie to his mother about the bruises and scratches, and then practice fighting on his own when everyone else was resting. Now and then, he would stumble upon whispered rumors and words of slander about him from the older members of the tribe. Other times such words would be about his mother, other times his father. His father was a curious subject to Technoblade. He never heard anyone ever say his name, not even his mother. As far as he knew, the tribespeople despised his father, and since mother never mentioned his name, Techno assumed she hated him too. This, of course, was not true. Ethra preferred not to think about Philza too much, because the memories of what had happened were too painful. The result of this lack of knowledge, though, led to Techno hating his human father as he grew up. He hated how he left them and how he was the sorry result of his parents' irresponsibility. Nevertheless, hardships aside, Techno grew to be a strong boy. He trained hard and fought well, gaining the genuine love and respect from his grandfather, who, upon seeing Techno's progress, decided to put away the original disdain he had for the child. Ethra and the chief were the only people in the tribe who genuinely cared for Techno, and they were the only two people Techno genuinely cared about in turn. When Techno was at the piglin equivalent of age 8, or about that age since piglins didn't celebrate birthdays, the tribe was attacked by a fearsome band of pigmen. These pigmen, in particular, were a group that called themselves the Orphans, where they grew up without parents, having survived only by brute strength and their unmerciful ways. They thrived on bloodlust and rightly earned their place amongst the terrors of the underworld. The piglins fought bravely, but for all their skill, they could not defeat the Orphans. Ethra knew the battle would be lost and turned to her young son. In his small hands she placed an old map, its vellum creased and worn from years of being folded and unfolded, but still fairly readable. It was one of the few things Philza had left behind. "Run, Techno," she urged. "Follow this map to the Overworld portal and find the yellow-haired man with wings. You will find a new home with him." He cried for her to come with him. She denied him this request. "They will see me, but you are small, Techno. They will not notice you, and I know you are strong as well. You'll be able to make it. Now go, before it's too late." They hugged each other tightly. He didn't want to leave his mother and his tribe behind, even if his tribe didn't like him very much. The Nether was the only home he'd ever known. How could he possibly live in the Overworld? The screams of destruction and clashing of swords faded as he sprinted away. Techno made his way to the sea of lava the map depicted and there befriended a small lava strider, who happily carried him across. He had many close calls. Once he nearly slipped off a high cliff, and there were many times where he ran into beings that were not very kind, including one interesting infant that was split into two sides down the middle of its face. It wailed when he cautiously approached it, awakening a nearby ghast that fired a searing meteor in his direction. He barely managed to take cover. When he peeked out from his hiding place, the strange infant with red and green eyes was gone. But that child's story is for another day. Eventually, Technoblade arrived at the obsidian portal to the Overworld. It howled and thrummed interdimensional energy, its unnerving, deep purple light swirling at its center. There was no point in stalling. Even if the portal ended up leading into some kind of bottomless pit, he figured he didn't have very much to live for anymore in the first place. His family was gone, his tribe extinct. If a new life didn't wait for him on the other side, he would accept death as a blessing. He took a deep breath and stepped through. The howling of the portal flowed wildly through his ears. Being in a portal was strange. Like every limb of his body was suddenly made of jelly, yet rigid. Transparent, but solid. Every nerve was awake and numb. Before he knew it, he was deposited on the other side. Bright light, unlike any he'd ever seen, flared into sight. He winced from its harshness, but appreciated its warmth. As his eyes adjusted, he began to take everything in with wonder. The overworld was oddly beautiful. There were so many colors he'd never seen before. The roof, what he would later learn to be the sky, was a bright blue. The ground soft beneath his hoof-like feet with grass that was, well, the best he could describe it at the time was a different shade of blue than the grasses of the warped forests in the underworld. There were plants around. He knelt down to observe one. A mushroom, maybe? Or perhaps a tiny tree? Whatever it was, it had soft leaves all around its top, the color of gold. Another was bright red with a pleasant smell. In the distance he could hear the far-off chatter of voices. Civilization. A path from the portal led to a small village by a pond of clear blue lava. There were people wandering about, trading and chatting. As he approached, he noticed how they seemed to have the reoccurring trait of a large nose and strong brow. "Hello?" he asked one. "Do you know where I can find a yellow-haired man with wings?" The villager screeched in a foreign language, alerting a gleaming giant with piercing red eyes and long arms. The other villagers gathered in a panic behind the giant, screeching unintelligibly. As it neared, the Leviathan raised its arms, and Techno realized too late what it intended to do. He lifted an arm above his head and screwed his eyes shut, with a cry of terror of his own, but the blow never came. Instead, a sturdy string suddenly wrapped itself around the metal beast and flung it away to the other side of the village. In its place descended a human in a floppy helmet, or a hat, a long black pelt over his shoulders, a coat, and, to Techno's astonishment, a pair of dark wings sprouting from his back. The man's hair was yellow. He shouted something in the same foreign language to the villagers, arms spread wide, then turned to face Techno, who had fallen to the ground in fear. The man smiled, bending down and outstretching a hand. Techno shrank away at first, but at the man's insistence, accepted the offered help and stood up. He was surprised when the man began to speak in Piglin. "Hello," he said. "Who might you be?" "I'm Technoblade. My mother told me to come find you," he mumbled. Several emotions seemed to cross the man's face. Techno managed to catch surprise and recognition, but the others were too fleeting for him to commit to memory. "Your mother? How is she?" the man inquired kindly. Techno sniffled. "I think she's dead. I think my whole tribe is." There was a look Techno could detect, and it was one he would never forget. A mixture of shocked sorrow and grief, pain and regret. The man opened his arms again, and Techno allowed him to pick him up. "I'm sorry," the yellow-haired man said quietly. "Technoblade, was it? You're safe now, don't worry. You can come live with me." He nodded tiredly into the crook of the man's shoulder. It was nice to be held again, and he was so exhausted his eyes began to close. He fought sleep a tad longer. There was still one more thing he needed to know. "Who are you?" "My name is Philza." Techno drifted off to sleep. Since then, Techno indeed found himself a new home, completed with a new family. Philza became his father figure. Philza never told Techno the truth after hearing how much Techno claimed to hate his biological father. He worried it would destroy their relationship and is haunted by the fact that he would need to tell Techno one day. To the present, Techno is unaware that Philza is indeed his real father. Philza also had two other sons. One was an 8-year-old boy with brown curly hair named Wilbur Soot, but he just went by his first name, Wilbur. The younger brother was an infant, at least at the time, with Philza's blonde hair and blue eyes, although as he got older it became clear that he did not inherit Philza's quiet nature like Wilbur did. This boy he came to know as Tommy. He got along well with them, enjoyed their sparring sessions and the times when they would simply mess around. He often didn't show it, but Techno cared for them very much, practically considering them brothers, not knowing that they were really his half-brothers. In their own ways, the boys cared for Techno as well. Tommy tried to cheer him up with that strange humor of his when Techno became upset. Wilbur liked to braid his hair, and upon discovering that piglins didn't celebrate birthdays, and that he therefore didn't know when he was born, offered to share his birthday with him. "We can say that you're 2 minutes older than me," Wilbur joked, and so they did. There were nights when Techno was overwhelmed by vivid nightmares which flung him back into the past. back into the Nether as the orphans tore apart his tribe, back to the lonely times he spent traveling to the Overworld portal. Those nights, his newfound family would comfort him. Tommy would ask absurd questions to start silly conversations. Wilbur would sing to the delicate strumming of his guitar, and Philza would hold him just like he had on his first day in the Overworld. On nights when he felt enraged rather than scared, they had late-night training sessions. Techno vowed that one day, he would make up for running away, his biggest regret in life, and he would take revenge on all the orphans that destroyed his people. He grew up with Wilbur and Tommy. The rest of his childhood was one of safety and peace. He trained into one of the best warriors to ever tread the Overworld. But life couldn't remain peaceful forever. There was a country that would be built, and voices that would cry for blood, wars to be fought, and betrayals that would be made. For now, though, we'll leave the story at Techno's new life in a world of new beginnings. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my storytelling. If you want to see more videos like this one, feel free to comment some feedback, and you can even suggest whose lore you want me to do next. If you'd like to keep up with my progress in my other projects, my socials are linked in the description below. This includes my relatively new gaming channel, so please go and subscribe to that as well if you don't mind. It would mean a lot. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!